APR versus APY. These are two abbreviations that you're going to see a lot when you start looking at investments and loans. And as someone dealing with money, it's really important you give a basic understanding of what the difference between these two terms are, so you sort of know what the investment or loan is talking about. And where this comes from is because while, yes, we are given annual percentage rates, they're not necessarily what you're actually earning in that year. And so an annual percentage rate is the interest rate that doesn't take compounding into effect. So it tends to be the one that we are going to put into our compounding interest formula. So, this gets inserted, this gets inputted into our math formulas. And then, based on that, we can use that and we sort of calculate how much money we will earn. Sometimes you'll hear this called as a nominal interest rate. The key things, when dealing with the annual percentage rate is often this is going to be the value that you see when loans are talking to you about how much money you're going to owe. Because more often than not, it's lower than the actual amount of interest that the sort of loan will occur. That is contrasted with the annual percentage yield. So this is the actual sort of amount of interest that's earned in a year. It takes the compounding into effect. And so you could almost think of it as it's sort of the percentage output from the actual dollar amounts. It's looking sort of at the end and how much percentage did it grow each year. And you'll so typically, obviously, investments are going to give you that APY value. So if you just go research investment accounts, they're going to show you what the APY is, not the APR. Now, legally, both loans and investments have to give you both. And so if you do read the fine print, you can find the APR or the APY for any given one of these accounts. But for what we're going to be doing in here is we want to be able to take our annual percentage rate and sort of turn it into what is that actual annual percentage yield. How much did that percent grow? Now, the reason why loans typically advertise your APR and and investments give you an APY is often your APR is going to be less than or equal to your APY. And this is going to be true. This is typical. I'm going to put a little asterisk by it. It's not 100% of the time because there are situations when you're dealing with monthly payments or monthly sort of inputting money into account that your APY might actually end up coming out less. But when you're looking at lump sum deposits, that APY value will typically be larger. All right, so how do we find that annual percentage yield? You actually just use the compound interest formula. If you notice right here, this sort of piece of the formula, the bulk of the formula, is just, if we go back up to our compound interest, the same thing we have in parentheses in our compound interest formula. And then we raise it to the nth power because that's the number of times it compounds in a year. Now, why do we have the -1? Because the output of this is going to give me sort of the 100% plus my APY percent. And we want just the APY percent. So that -1 takes out the 100%, just like when we were dealing with our exponential functions. There are some alternative forms to this formula. We will get into them in a future video. But for this particular case, when we're dealing with compound interest, we're just going to focus on this version. So here we have, and I took went-online research. So we have a credit card. And you'll notice when you're dealing with credit cards, what you're going to find is they'll say, oh, okay, it has a variable APR. And often that APR depends on what your credit ratings, your credit score is. But for the sake of this, so we have 17.99% and 26.74%. Yes, credit card debt has a huge interest rate. So we want to know, what is the actual annual percentage yield if you sort of just kept your debt within that credit card. And so we're going to actually calculate this twice just so we can see it 2 different times. Now, we're going to say that interest is calculated daily. So that means our end value is 365. All right, so for that lower end one, that APR of 17.99%. So using my APY formula, I would have that 1 plus, and I turn my percent into a decimal over that 365, and we're going to raise it to the 365 power. And that's going to get you 1.704. So remember I said, as I mentioned earlier, that's really 100% plus an extra 19.7%. And it's that 19.7% we care about. That's going to be our low end APY. So if you had that low APR value, you're actually acquiring 19.7% interest on that loan every month. Now, not everyone gets the low end. So what if you had the high end APR? So you had an APR of 26.74%. What would my APY be? And I'm going to look at this one a little differently. So this one I sort of changed into a percent. I'm still going to have that 1 plus 0.2674 all divided by 365 to the 365 power. And remember, we're going to minus 1. So I get 1.3064 minus 1, taking out that 100%, gets me the decimal 0.3064, or 30.64%. So a 30% APY. Whew. And so that's just sort of looking at, if I'm given an APR value, how do I take that APR and turn it into my annual percentage yield? So I can sort of know actually how much interest is being earned.